Pam Dunn, I'm going to start over again because I had 5 words coming out of my mouth. False start. I'm nervous. I'm actually nervous about the show. Okay.
How can you be nervous? There's no way, man.
That'll be in the blooper reel. Welcome. It's the first episode of Demo Delta. I think I almost forgot the name of the podcast. It's that new. It's that fresh. The podcast name was still up for grabs until a second ago. Not really, but it's fun to say that way. Anyways, I'm so glad you're here. This is going to be a very exciting podcast. 2 episodes actually launched right away, which means you could watch them in any order. I would recommend this one first because that's actually just the order the conversation happened, but you do whatever you want to do. This is the first episode officially. Second episode, you can binge right after this one. It's going to be just great. But what's this episode even about? If you've seen the trailer or maybe you haven't, this is all about that if you improve your life, you can improve your demo. I really believe that. It's the things outside of our normal day-to-day work lives that really help us to be better as human beings, to be better at our jobs. It's all inclusive. We're going to be talking to a lot of great guests, hearing about what they do outside of work, hearing about the parts of their lives that have made them better, and maybe get some inspiration ourselves to get better ourselves on some of that. Today's guest is no different. No exception from any other guests we're going to have, obviously. Pam Dunn. If you don't know Pam, you should follow her on LinkedIn. I have to read this list because it's right from her profile, but it describes her well. Pre-sales leader, strategic advisor, speaker, curious and continual learner, a startup enthusiast or startup junkie, as she says, and I'm not making this last one up, a self-proclaimed podcast junkie that she gets into a fair amount. She's also been doing this for 20 years. She's been in the pre-sales world for 20 years, has some great insights. We actually talk about the show. We talk about how things have changed a bit in the pre-sales world over the last even just 5 years, but even from when she had started to begin in pre-sales till now. We also start to talk about connecting with people and the impact that can have on just your mental health. Very excited for you guys to hear the first part of this episode. So hop right on in. We'll see you in the interview. Pam Dunn, I am so honored to welcome you to the first ever Demo Delta podcast episode. Welcome to the show.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me. I've been so excited for this and couldn't wait for it to get started. So thank you for having me on the first one.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we've been talking for quite a while trying to figure out what would be fun to talk about with kind of your interests, et cetera, for the show. And I think, if you don't mind, can we take a little bit of time to talk about the show itself? Because I think people might be actually interested in it. I know I can give a little bit of my take on it. I know you had some questions as well and was like, let's just save this for our conversation.
I totally agree. I think inquiring minds out there in pre-sales land want to know what's going on with you and your new podcast. So yeah, give us a little insight in that. I think it'd be really helpful. And I think get people excited for the new venture.
Yeah, I hope so as well. So after Demo Jockeys had ended, I really enjoyed making that show. Making it with Adam was fantastic, fun time. But it helped me to kind of fine tune a little bit about what do I really want to bring to the pre-sales community? What do I bring that I have not heard another voice say yet? And I was reminded of, I forget what conversation, I was having a conversation with someone I was actually mentoring, someone trying to break into the pre-sales space through the Pre-Sales Collective. I serve as a career advisor for their pre-sales academy. And the conversation was around, well, what is it that makes someone unique? What is it when you look for someone, what are you looking for? And I have answered this question so many times, and I was like, that's actually what I care deeply about. Because my answer is, I care a lot about what people do outside of their work. The other things, maybe the other jobs they've had that haven't been in sales, their hobbies, the things about them that have molded them into the unique human being that they are. And I feel like that's an overlooked part of being in pre-sales is we're not just these robot sellers. We've got vast experiences. It's a very unique role to begin with. So the uniqueness of every single person is kind of what makes us great at our jobs.
Right. I think that's true. Actually, this is so timely because I literally had this same conversation with a pre-sales leader today, and we were talking about, do you have to be an introvert? I mean, an extrovert, not an introvert. Are introverts sort of excluded from what we do? And it was a really interesting conversation. How we all come from very different backgrounds. So, yeah, it's so timely that you're talking about it as well.
Yeah, and that's. Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, there's so many topics, because when I was then thinking about what would be all the things we could talk about, I mean, it's been everything from different hobbies to introverts and extroverts, to the things that we're probably going to be talking about here, to different courses you may have taken, people who've been teachers, people who enjoy getting out and going for a hike. I mean, all these different things that, as I reflected my own life, I mean, I feel like I could interview myself 9 times on 9 different topics. So there's got to be these stories out there from different people. So that's what the show is going to focus on. We're not going to be talking as much about what's the best practice for how to do a demo. We might get there with the thing has improved my demo in some way, but the focus isn't on that. The focus is instead on, this is something really cool in my life. Here's how it's made me better. And, maybe you should try it out if you're looking for a hobby. Maybe you should try listening to more podcasts. Everyone should listen to more podcasts.
I totally agree with you, and I always share the ones with people that I'm listening to, hoping that they'll get some benefit out of it too, but also having that dialogue, right? I love to talk about them with other people just to see what they felt about it, right? I feel like we're all being shaped in a different way, and not only personally but professionally, right? I feel like you're right. It's sort of guiding the way we think about our jobs, which we spend a lot of time at. But I think that that's just so important, how we're kind of growing in not only our profession, but personally, to be able to get, at some other level in our profession, or maybe we're not. Maybe we're just trying to learn about ourselves as a human. And
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that too. I'm totally fine with that too. But yeah, well. So anything different you're going to do this time with this podcast? Anything you want to let your listeners know about this one?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. There will not be as frequent of episodes. I think we burned ourselves pretty hard going every week on those. So it's going to be an every other week show. But we're still going to have guests on here. You don't have to do book readings between each of them. So you can save a little bit of time. You don't have to worry about showing up at that book club without reading the book. But otherwise, it's still going to be having great pre-sales professionals and thought leaders and influencers on the show. And the topics will be, focused on that person. And so I selfishly I feel like to sit in this seat and learn from people that I talk to. And I get to invite people on the show just to say, can you please teach me something? Because I don't want to know. So I feel like I'm getting the most benefit out of this, really. It's a very selfish podcast, if you think about it.
I love it. I love it. No, I think it's so good because also, it's something that not everybody's doing, right? Like you said, there's lots of voices out there, right? We're all trying to find like our different voice, or maybe just, something that really interests us as well. And, sometimes it's a little bit self-serving, but I think it's good that we're all trying to learn from each other and stretch and not just keep regurgitating the same content over and over again. So I love that you're taking a different approach as well.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm hoping others like it as well. We'll see. We'll see, right? First, I do want to know though, Pam.
Yes.
Who are you? I mean, you're on this show, but I don't know that we kind of dove right in. But so tell me a little bit about your background, and then we'll get into what is it that people might not know about you as the second half. But first, like a little bit on your background, what you're up to and all that.
Yeah, definitely. I've been at this pre-sales profession now for, my goodness, over 20 years. It feels like when I say 20 years, like a lifetime, but I have so much more to go. And I feel like it's like everyone, I kind of fell into pre-sales and I had no idea what I was getting myself into. This was before the time when we had training and books and podcasts. Really, we were just sort of figuring it out together. And I don't think I've ever really looked back. I've been a pre-sales leader. I actually have a unique background in that I was a pre-sales leader, and then I went back into the field and essentially carried a bag and did demos again and kind of joined the startup world. So I talked to a recruiter the other day. They said, you should call yourself a startup junkie. And I was like, ooh, that doesn't sound good, though.
I kind of like that, though. As kind of a fellow startup junkie, I can identify with that. Yeah.
Right.
So how many startups then? How many does it take to get to be a junkie? Like what's the?
I think once you hit more than 4, you're definitely, a serial something or other, and you might be able to call yourself a junkie at that point. And it's a little bit of a glutton for punishment, but the good news is I just met some really great people in my network, and I kind of followed them around as well. So I'd get a really great AE that I loved pairing with, and they'd call me up and say, hey, I found this great startup. Do you want to try it out? And be like, yeah, sure, let's try it out. So yeah, I think that actually, that's a classification right there, that you're a junkie if you actually want to follow some AEs that you've worked with more than once. But for me, it was, three strikes and you're out. So if any of you are listening out there to me talk about this, I followed plenty of AEs, and once they, took me to places that didn't work out after 3 times, I couldn't follow them anymore. I had to follow somebody else.
Yeah, that's unfortunate because sometimes you really click with someone, you can sell well with them, but if they're not picking the right place, that's tough. Yeah. That's tough. But being a startup junkie, I feel like there's more. I feel like available if you're okay with that chaos. This is where it is at. Come and join the chaos.
And the chaos that you're okay with, right? You have to remember that there's probably not a lot of process, and you're gonna build the plane as you're trying to fly it sometimes. And I still remember I was in ERP for 10 years, or core financials, actually. I did core financials. And so I joined this little marketing automation startup, and I didn't even know what marketing automation was, quite frankly. And I remember starting there. I don't even think we had the user interface yet. Like, we were literally showing like a PowerPoint of what it was going to look like. And we sort of did a click through. So you clicked on it, it would open up the rest of the application. But yeah, they stuck me at a Java 1 conference at the Moscone Center. It stood me up in front of the booth, and I had my little card that had my elevator pitch, and I was studying it on the way to the floor, and I would literally tell people what marketing automation was. And it was so much fun, and I literally got bitten at that point, and I don't think I've ever looked back from there. And it's just been a cool journey. I feel like pre-sales is just, as much as it's very similar to what we started doing, it's so different too. You know what I mean? I feel like we're just learning so much, and there's just so much resource out there. And when I talk about it, people always say, oh, you get really excited. I said, yeah, I just think it's one of the greatest jobs and the greatest professions that you could get yourself into. And you can take it in so many different directions. I think that's really cool about it too. I feel like I've talked to so many people who say to me, oh, I'm not really that technical, or, do I need to have this kind of skill set? And I said, honestly, if you're just someone who doesn't mind rolling up your sleeves, if you're someone who doesn't, mind, just diving in and learning things and being super curious, and also wanting to understand people and connecting with an audience of people who, are going to be asking you what feels like some really hard questions. If you love that, then you will love doing this. That's kind of what you have to have. You have to want to be not only at a startup with the chaos, but you also have to be this person who just is not really afraid just to try something else, right? Sometimes the audience isn't really connecting with you, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, what do I need to do? I need to figure this out. How do I get people to, not fall asleep during this demo or whatever? So yeah, I think it's just fascinating. And I think that's what drove me to continue on, right? That kind of human connection. I know we're going to dive deep into that today, but just that being able to connect with people and uncovering things about what's really going on in an organization, and having grown up in this world of actual in real life demos, right? In real life meetings where you didn't have Zoom, you didn't have GoToMeeting, whatever was the flavor of the day. You actually had to show up in an office and watch people's dynamics.
And that was your whole day too. That was it. That was your whole day.
Oh, I used to love that. I mean, that's what I loved about it. I loved figuring out the human interaction, like how people in the room are actually talking. Who's obviously the power person, because they're the ones that everyone kind of turns to and listens when they talk. I used to find that fascinating, more so than my product or what I was demoing. I just found people really fascinating.
Yeah. Now, I do have to pause for a second, because I have to ask this question. Have you actually made someone fall asleep while you're demoing? Because you bring this up.
I don't know if I've ever made someone fall asleep.
But it sounds like they have then.
I have actually fallen asleep. I've demoed to one of those like huge rooms at a large company where, they brought in, 25, 30 people. And this is like an all day demo. And I still remember one guy towards the back kind of nodding off and thinking, I don't even know if he knows why he's here with all these people. You know what I mean?
He heard there was going to be lunch and he really had a free day. So
yeah. He's thinking there's a huge meeting going on in here and I might as well just join and sit in the back of the room. No one's going to know the difference. I'll just jump up and grab the cookies and donuts. I'm happy. So yeah, I do remember a few of those. Hopefully not too many, but it's hard to do on Zoom though, right? It's hard for you to try to fall asleep. Have you ever had that happen? Have you ever had anyone fall asleep in any of yours?
I actually have. And it wasn't a 25-person meeting. It wasn't a 10-person meeting. It was a 1-person meeting. It was me and the account executive in person, face to face. He just...
No.
And we stopped and said, I don't remember his name, Greg? And he was asleep. We're like, I think we can lost this deal.
Yeah, that's usually a sign. That's probably the biggest sign for one guy.
It's probably better than getting the I'll call you because we knew right then we could spend our time elsewhere.
Yeah, that's probably a good... Yeah, if you can't keep him awake in a one-person meeting, you can probably be assured that he's not going to make any decisions with your company.
Yeah. I honestly don't remember what I was demoing or how I was demoing it. It may have been the way I was doing it, which almost then is like that's a whole other level of exploration. If I could go back and see how did I put someone to sleep, I'd love to know that. That would be a good educational thing for me right now.
Well, it could also mean you have a really soothing voice, and when you speak to someone, they're just kind of lulled into whatever it is you're saying, Jack.
I want to get them excited. I don't want to lull them to sleep.
Yeah, that's true. It's probably not something you want to rest on, but maybe that's what that poor guy needed. He just had a baby, and he was unable to sleep at night. I don't know.
There could be all kinds of external factors. That's very true. I'll fast forward then back to the end of what you were saying before. You were talking about finding ways to connect with right people being almost even more important to you than even what you're demoing, which that's actually, I think, the thing we were going to be talking about anyway. So I kind of want to dive into that a little bit. Sure. Talk to me a bit about what are the things around people, communicating people, connecting with people that have got you fascinated nowadays.
I feel like I always talk about how I listen to a lot of podcasts. Quite frankly, between the podcasts and the books that I have queued up ready to go, I have plenty to keep me busy. So I tend to, if I'm going to try to get out first thing in the morning, let's say for half an hour, I usually run, but today it's 90 something degrees and 60% humidity. So I did not run today. I did actually just walk. It was way too hot.
No.
So I like to spend that time just kind of queuing up my podcast to try to get through. But I do listen to a lot of leadership podcasts. Most recently, I don't know if I mentioned this, but I was at a company, Contentful, where I actually managed a team of solution consultants. And so it's been about, me trying to figure out this leadership journey, having gone back to it, right? It's been a little while since I was a leader and just really trying to better my leadership skills and trying to figure out how to connect better with the people who actually report up to me. So I've been queuing up those. I literally have, I bet, I don't know, I don't think it's a dozen, but there's quite a few that I'm trying to listen to and a few books. So I had queued up one of my podcasts and I'd already started it, right? So I knew it was the next one up. So I pop in my ear pods and head on out. This is probably 2 weeks ago, expecting to hear. I listen to a lot of John Maxwell. I listen to a lot of those kind of leadership podcasts, but I get going and I hear a different one. Oh, that's really weird. I had it ready to go. How come all of a sudden this other one is starting up? So I just start walking and I start listening to it. And it's all about better connections. It's talking about being memorable. And I was thinking, this is such a strange timing for this topic because I was just talking with someone about putting together a presentation for, one of these big, demo events. And I was thinking, I feel like what we're missing, or what could go on with my last year's topic, which is about storytelling, is back to connections, and what can we do to be more memorable, right? Because we want people to, number one, buy something from us, but we also want them to remember us in a sea of other competitors that we're all starting to sound alike. So it's so strange that this podcast literally popped up, and I was walking, I kept yelling at Siri, like, take a note, Siri, because I was just so fascinated by the topic, because it was so relevant to what I was really thinking about. So rather than going through the leadership one, I started to listen to this and listening to about how I think I even wrote it down here, about being to be memorable, you have to be like portable, right? People have to like take it with them and remember, but also you have to have it in these bite-sized chunks. So it's almost like crafting your message about being more memorable, but also so that there's little chunks that people take away that they remember you by. So some of it is, being able to talk and say things that people go, oh yeah, maybe I don't remember you, but I remember this saying. So it's the same way that, and a little bit like a jingle, right? So you remember some of these things from your childhood, right? When you saw some commercial and it was supposed to like evoke some memory of something, and this little jingle, like, I think it was a Schoolhouse Rock when I was a kid, conjunction, junction, what's your function, that kind of thing. Like, it's supposed to be about these kind of little bite-sized things that you remember that evoke that memory, right? So it's how I was thinking about, wow, maybe if we could figure out how to use this in pre-sales, we'll make sure that, our message is being heard. We're actually connecting better with the audience through a number of different, so it got me really thinking. And then it felt like every single walk I went on after that one, because the good news is it was only a 30-minute podcast. So I got through it really quick, and I've listened to it 3 or 4 times since then, because I'm just so fascinated by it. But also every other podcast after that, it happened a couple more times. So I'm trying to go back to my leadership ones, listen to the latest John Maxwell about communication. And next thing you know, it's, somebody else talking about connections and making like better connections, is not only good for us as humans, but also this kind of like Harvard study about your brain, right? When you become 80 years old, if you've made better connections earlier on in life, the studies show it makes you healthier when you're 80. And actually a happier, healthier 80-year-old comes from, your lessons learned in your 30s and 40s and onward. But if you can get it to that point, by the time I think you were 50 years old, your 80-year-old self is going to be so much happier and healthier. And
that's fascinating. I mean, how are they defining connections? Is it in that same kind of bite size being memorable, or how are they defining connecting with people?
So it's taking a step back even before the memorable. It's really about this other podcast talking about connections with just people, right? Here we have been kind of in this post-COVID, after being locked down and kind of being not doing things face to face, like the human brain craves actual people. We crave that as a human species. And there was another study, I think it was the University of Chicago, that was talking about how the brain is actually wired when you make a connection, when you're actually talking to someone. It's harder to do over something like this because apparently there's all of these, hormones going around, all this stuff that's actually happening in the brain. That's not only like there's physical things that are happening besides, the mental things and the listening and all that. So it was really all about just making connections with people regardless. So the whole connecting with your audience, right? I always said to my SEs, if you don't make a connect, like the guy who fell asleep, right? If you don't make a connection with that person, they're just going to tune the whole thing out. They're just like, oh, this person's talking at me. So it was more about, hey, if I sit next to a stranger on an airplane, right, I might just put my AirPods in and or do my work and get on my computer. But if you can actually talk to that person, you can actually release, the serotonin in the brain and the oxycodone, all these things, all these like good feel good things that are happening in your brain when you're just talking to a person. And these studies have actually shown that, these kind of physical connections that are being made are good for us and actually make you feel so much better than if you had just gone and sat down and worked on your computer and not talked to anyone. So it's kind of fascinating to hear the connection that you we all think about, okay, I feel so much better when I talk to people. I'm definitely probably the extrovert. I like to talk to people, which is fairly obvious when you ask me to be on a podcast and I say, sure, what do you want me to do? I'm happy to join.
Yeah. I think you did agree to this before I knew fully what the show was going to be too. So
right.
Yeah, I'll do it. Sure. I'm like, okay, sure. I'll let you know when I figure out what we're doing.
Funny story is we ran out for coffee today on this day with my husband, and he said, what's the podcast about again? And why are you doing this? And I said, oh, because Jack's doing it, and he's awesome. And, it's going to be a little this, a little of that. And we're going to, I was trying to describe it to him. He's like, okay, good. Have fun. I obviously did terrible justice to you and your new podcast.
No, it's all good. I think it's going to take some time to form too. So that's okay. That's the beauty of these things. But no, I think it's absolutely fascinating about the piece around connecting with people in our brains, and from the longevity perspective. You said it's only really been a couple of weeks, but have you put any of this into practice in your personal life? Are you seeing any type of anything that you would attribute to being more intentional about connecting with people?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because now I think about it more. I'm actually super conscious of even talking to strangers, right? And thinking, okay, this could be your next, great connection by talking to someone who you're just walking by. Or it's funny, I'm looking for better ways to actually implement it. I don't know if I've actually implemented it yet, but I'm just fascinated that like the next podcast, I feel like builds upon the ones that I've already listened to. I think that's actually what's fascinating me more than anything, that I'm finding a connection between all of these things that look and feel almost random, but I feel like they're falling into a place where they're supposed to be. If that makes sense? Yeah. For whatever reason, that podcast popped up when it did, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then the next one, I'm like, wow, something's happening here. All these connections. Maybe I should make sure I'm making some better connections. Yeah, we're having our big a Boston meetup here for the Presales Collective. Speaking of Presales Collective this week, so I'm going to put it into practice and see what I can get out of some new people that I have not yet met, who are ready for the Pam Dunn experiment.
Yeah, I think it's something that we definitely don't think about, especially as we've all become more hermity, I suppose. Yeah. Right. Or just okay with just sort of the virtual connections, or sort of the times when we're getting together to talk about something specific versus sometimes when we're just getting together to connect with people, right? I feel like as a society, we're doing that less and less. And I think I definitely see us all feeling it. Like we're not, it's not, it could be maybe contributed to the increase of everyone's just stress levels, which have been going up over the past 4 years, like people's stress overall. So I wonder if we took more time to intentionally say, you know what, I'm not feeling like it. I don't want to do it, but I'm going to go talk to someone today.
That's funny. Yeah, part of the study too, from the University of Chicago one also was they took 2 groups of people on a train, right? Because this is usually the place where people are trying to do their own thing, like leave me alone, I don't really want to talk to people. Mm-hmm. Right. And they said, okay, to one, the first group, okay, you actually have to talk to a stranger. You have to actually make a connection. You have to, have a dialogue back and forth with them. And then this other group, they said to them, okay, we're just going to make sure that you don't have to talk to anybody. And then they said to them, they asked them a few questions, and they said, hey, group that, what do you think? What do you think about this? What's the top of mind? And they all said, I'm not looking forward to it. There's nothing about connecting with random strangers on a train that sounds good to me.
That sounds about me going on a train with the purpose of meeting someone. Right. I would not look forward to that.
Right. Exactly. Right. And that's exactly what they said. And then they kind of, I don't know if they called it like a happiness meter. By the end of this, and I think I want to say it was more than half an hour. So they made them actually talk to people for a while. And when they tested them at the end, the people who actually connected with random strangers, they actually were like off the charts happy. There wasn't one person that was mad that they actually had to do the study. Everyone said, oh my gosh, I just felt so much better. I got off the train. I wasn't agitated. The people who left the train without making any connections, they were cranky, the train wasn't fast enough. Like they were still their usual, like nobody, whatever, trains like get me from point A to point B, right? I don't want to have to think about all this other stuff. But the people were so like just grounded, and they felt like their mental health was better. It was to the researchers, it was eye-opening, right? They actually got way better results than they thought they were going to get out of that study.
That's really fascinating. I mean, I struggle with a lot of just getting in my own head. I've had mental health issues in the past. I mean, just to be very frank about it, I think we need to take the stigma off of that. 100%. To the point where I do a lot of things to try and get myself in a good headspace. So, meditation, exercise, some routines that I need to have. But I never think about maybe I should go talk to someone to improve my mental health today, right? That never crosses my mind, but it sounds like maybe that's something I should be considering. I should add that into my daily routine, I feel like.
Make a connection with one random person or it's interesting, even I attended a Salesforce tour last night in Boston, and again, I know I'm the extrovert, but sometimes I'm listening to my podcast and I just kind of want to just like be in my own little head. But it's just amazing to me making those real life connections with people, like how much better you really do feel.
Well, that's part one of part two of our interview with Pam. Great conversation so far. I really hope you're enjoying it. If you want to make sure when the next one comes out, make sure you're subscribed. Wait a minute. The next episode's already out. I put episodes 1 and 2 out at the same time. So stop listening to me and go listen to part 2 right now. Go right now. But subscribe. So we'll see you in the next one. Bye.